Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty sleepers. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go. So our first sleeper, Troy Franklin. I know I was hard on Franklin early in the season. He got off to a rough start in his career, but now things are starting to turn around. So far this year in 6 games, he has 12 catches, 110 yards, a touchdown on 21 targets, 2 catches and 18.3 yards a game. Of course, these are not very interesting numbers, but he's progressively been getting more and more involved each week, and some of his performance has been hidden by the Broncos' overall lack of a passing game. In the last 2 weeks, Franklin has played over 50% of snaps with 7 catches, 81 yards, and a touchdown. So he's picking it up. He's gathering some momentum with Josh Reynolds, who's been on IR, and of course had the unfortunate shooting incident. He won't be back anytime soon. So I hope everything is good with Reynolds, but he won't be coming back anytime soon, which means that Franklin will continue to have opportunity in this offense. Now, Franklin was a great prospect. He entered the NFL just 21 years old, and in his final college season, he had 81 catches, 1,383 yards, 14 touchdowns, 106.4 yards per game. Ridiculous college numbers. He came at Oregon with Bo Nix, so he has experience playing with Nix already, which is good. The Broncos have few wide receiver options and no relevant tight ends. As we mentioned, Reynolds had an injury and then was involved in that shooting incident. So he's not coming back. Marvin Mims is permanently in the doghouse. For now, it seems like Franklin is the wide receiver 2 behind Courtland Sutton. I don't think the Broncos are selling Courtland Sutton. They're 4-3. So it seems like Sutton will remain the wide receiver 1 for the rest of the year. And then Franklin will be the 2. Maybe Devon Vele is the 3. So no one relevant at tight end. Greg Dulcich is even more in the doghouse than Marvin Mims. Now, how do you acquire a player like Troy Franklin? Well, it's tough to get players like Franklin because he's rostered in every single Dynasty league, because he was drafted in every single rookie draft. And trading for him directly is hard because it's going to cost too much. I'm happy to include Franklin in a bigger deal as a throw-in acquisition. Again, the point of these sleeper videos is more to identify players who are doing well rather than necessarily talking about how we're going to pay for them, because it's probably too late to pay for some of them. But if you want to talk about it, the patreon.com/fantasyadvice on my Patreon, that's where we're going to talk about trading for players, especially in this range. That's where I do my best trade advice. Let's move on. Next player, Rashod Bateman. Bateman is quietly having a year 4 breakout. It's partly because of Lamar Jackson's increased passing performance, but also involves some strong play from Bateman. So far in 7 games, 21 catches, 394 yards, 3 touchdowns, 3 catches, and 56.3 yards game. It's already a career high in receiving touchdowns, more yards than he had in 16 games last year, most yards per game of his career, and most catches per game since 2021. He's played at least 62% of the snaps in every game. The only reason his snap share isn't higher is because the Ravens use a lot of 12 and even 13 personnel. But Bateman's clearly their wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers. He's competing with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Justice Hill for that secondary receiving option in the passing game. The problem is there's a few too many of those players. Now, why do I have Bateman as a dynasty sleeper? Strong advanced stats. Zay Flowers dealing with that ankle injury, and Bateman might have some more potential elsewhere. So Bateman has 2.16 yards per route run, 18th among wide receivers, and 2.61 fantasy points per target, 6th among wide receivers. So when he's seeing targets and running routes, he's doing well. The problem is that even though Lamar is playing better as a passer, the Ravens remain a run-first team. That is not going to change. It's not going to change. Rashod Bateman is never going to have a large target volume on this team unless Zay Flowers vanished. And then in that case, maybe. But otherwise, no. So we know Flowers has an ankle injury. I'm not sure he's going to play this week. He may not. But we saw last week that Bateman had a little bit of a breakout when Flowers was struggling, missing some time. So it could give Bateman some more opportunities to show out. Now, Bateman's still young. He turns 25 in November. He signed a contract extension with the Ravens through 2026. The Ravens actually made a really shrewd move. They took advantage of Bateman's low stats in their own system to sign him to a very cheap extension. He carries cap hits of just $4 million this year, around $5 million in 2025, and just under $8 million in 2026. So at those numbers, Bateman's a bargain in the exploding wide receiver market. But if he continues to play well, maybe he'll earn a larger contract, a larger role, or potentially a trade to another team like what happened with Hollywood Brown in the past. Now, how do you acquire Rashod Bateman? Similar to Franklin, acquiring Bateman directly isn't really that likely. I did see a couple of trades in the trade database involving Dynasty Daddy, involving a 4th-round pick for Bateman, which I would be happy to do. I would definitely send a 4th-round pick for him. Otherwise, he's more of a player to target as a throw-in piece to complete a deal, especially if the opposing manager doesn't have a 3rd-round or 4th-round pick to add in. Of course, we know I like picks as throw-in pieces, but Bateman would be the type of player that maybe someone else wouldn't miss, and you could get some flex value out of as the season goes on. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos. There's also DM advice, sometimes Patreon-only content, some other stuff. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. Now, if you want to know more about Patreon, check out both of my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who joined. I will say this. People ask me, well, why don't you answer questions for free on Twitter? Then people will sign up. That doesn't work. If it worked, then do it. It doesn't work. It's never worked. People ask the questions for free. If I get it wrong, they blast me. If I get it right, I don't even get a thank you. Nobody signs up for my Patreon because of that. That never works. So that's why we don't do that anymore. We don't do that on Twitter. We don't do that in the YouTube comments. It doesn't work. I don't care if people are annoyed. I don't care. It is what it is. It's a business decision, and also honestly a decision for my mental health. Certainly my mental health is a lot better this year than it was last year when I was very involved on Twitter. I'm doing a lot better, focusing on making better YouTube content. This is the free content that I'm interested in actually doing. I'm not interested really in answering Twitter questions as free content. I don't mind doing these YouTube videos. I enjoy doing this. Get a lot of views on these YouTube videos. I appreciate everyone who watches. But this is the free content now. Interactive content will be for paying customers only. I say that on every video, and I hope it's clear now that maybe this is the 20th time I've talked about it, that it is not a phase. It's not an experiment. It's not going to change. It's not going to change. I promise you won't regret signing up for the Patreon. If more people were signing up for it, I wouldn't be spending 2 to 3 minutes of all of these videos on this part of it. But clearly, I need to do something different in pitching the Patreon, or pitch it more aggressively, or talk about it more, because people aren't signing up for it enough. So it's patreon.com/fantasy advice. The link is in the top right corner. You can find it in my Twitter bio as well. Tyler FF Creator on Twitter. And I don't mind doing these ad reads. There's a reason I don't pre-record these. I just like to kind of have them come out as I'm feeling. But yeah, I really, really appreciate when people sign up. I am very active in Patreon Discord pretty much every day, all day. So yeah, you won't regret signing up. And with that said, let's move into our next player. Well, next up, Cade Otton. He's had a very strong year already, and now he has even more of an opportunity. So far, 27 catches, 263 yards, touchdown, 41 targets, 3.9 catches, and 37.6 yards a game. Clear career highs in yards and catches per game, and on pace to far outdo his target totals for 2022 and 2023. Of course, he went off in week 7 with 8 catches for 100 yards on 10 targets. Came after the Mike Evans injury, and now we know that Chris Godwin is also hurt and out for the year. Now, Otton has been consistent, if not remarkable, since being drafted as a 4th-round rookie in 2022. He immediately took the starting tight end job for the Bucs as a rookie. And in 2022, 42 catches, 391 yards, 2 touchdowns, 65 targets, 2.6 catches, and 24.4 yards a game. And then last year, 47 catches, 455 yards, 4 touchdowns, 67 targets, 2.8 catches, and 26.8 yards a game. Basically identical production. He's produced mediocre but consistent numbers previously. We know Godwin and Evans played 15 games each in 2022 and 17 games each last year. So they didn't miss any time last year. 2022, they missed 2 games each. Otton has not had many opportunities without one or both of them in the lineup. We know most tight ends don't really earn or demand targets because offenses are more efficient throwing to wide receivers. Yes, some of the top guys, Travis Kelce in his prime, Mark Andrews when he was healthy, Brock Bowers now, yes, they demand targets. But most tight ends are given targets when top wide receivers are struggling or they're out. tight ends, or they're not present on the team at all, they pick up the slack in those situations, especially if they're previously trusted by the coaching staff and are out there on almost every snap. And Otton fits in both of those categories. Now, how do you acquire Otton? Now, unlike some of the other players, I did see some deals to acquire Otton directly. It's important to note that I don't believe Otton will ever develop into a target earning tight end. I don't think so. I think we're talking about a Cole Kmet type player, maybe a Dalton Schultz, not a, Brock Bowers. But you can buy Cade Otton for 25 third and 25 fourth. I saw that one. That's interesting, especially in the tight end premium format. And then this other one, Cade Otton in a 25 second for Rashid Shaheed. I like Shaheed, but he's out for the year. I'm fine taking this offer, using Otton this year, and then having the 25 second to kind of make up for the value of losing Shaheed. Now, our final player, Cedric Tillman. Tillman mysteriously broke out this last week. It's not so mysterious. After so long of doing nothing. Maybe it's the start of something good. It kind of came out of nowhere. Tillman has 11 catches, 90 yards on 17 targets, 1.6 catches, and 12.9 yards a game. But basically all of this occurred last week in week 7 after the Amari Cooper trade. 8 catches, 81 yards, 12 targets in week 7 with an 82% snap share. It's his first time this year even playing 40% of snaps. But he was a solid prospect and a third-round pick in 2023, so it's not that shocking that he had a strong game. Essentially, the Browns traded for Jerry Jeudy to replace Tillman in that outside wide receiver role, kept Elijah Moore in his role, and essentially Tillman was replaced after 1 year of doing nothing. But now that Cooper's gone, he's back in a role. Now, Tillman was a strong prospect at Tennessee. In 2021, he had 64 catches, 1,081 yards, 12 touchdowns, 83.2 yards a game. He had a lot of big plays, best college season, but then he suffered an ankle injury in 2022, and he got a bit overshadowed in the draft process by Jalen Hyatt. So it kind of fell down the ranks a little bit. But we know that Jameis Winston is going to throw the ball. He chucks the ball to his wide receivers. That's always been his style. It's not going to change. Tillman is the clear outside wide receiver now opposite Jerry Jeudy. Elijah Moore will be in the slot. But Tillman will be out there for most snaps. He played far more snaps than Elijah Moore, a little bit less than Jerry Jeudy last week, but he was far more effective than Jeudy. Now, how do you acquire Tillman? It's mostly acquired as a throw-in, like most sleepers. I wouldn't pay a third for Tillman just yet. I'd be happy to pay a fourth, though, of which there were a couple deals in there. I just wanted to call attention to Tillman as a sleeper. His rookie year was very rough, but I do think he has an opportunity. Second-year breakouts do happen, and he's someone who's on my radar for a potential second half of second year breakout. Now, I have a couple of Patreon questions. They're both kind of open-ended, so let's jump into those. Any lessons you've learned this year in fantasy that you'll apply going forward? I mean, honestly, I've had a pretty successful year. This has been by far my most successful year of creating content, by far my most successful year in terms of accuracy, my most successful year in terms of number of patrons, and, my Scott Fishbowl team is doing well. My teams are doing well. So overall, it's been a very successful year. Now, in terms of lessons, I think the big lesson is the tight end position. Tight ends are very hard to trust. Spending an early pick on tight end in redraft probably isn't the right move, or even in Dynasty, unless you're very sure about the volume and the talent. We just have to be very careful with tight ends. Tight ends, maybe looking in the cheaper range was smarter. But yeah, just a reevaluation of the tight end position that I think I'm going to do moving forward. And I guess this may be redraft, could be Dynasty. Are there any players you'd be specifically targeting for contending teams that need more firepower? So firepower has to be a player who's really highly valued, but or has a lot of potential production, but is buyable. Chris Olave, I think, is a name that people might be annoyed with. He has kind of struggled, but if you look at the route running and open score metrics, he's open a lot. He's running really, really good routes. He's doing really, really well. Production just hasn't come. Rashid Shaheed is gone, and Derek Carr is coming back probably next week. So Olave could be a wide receiver 1 down the stretch. And I think Olave might be a player I'd be looking to acquire. Maybe you could toss Jalen Waddle in there as well with Tua coming back. People have been frustrated with him. Those are a couple ideas. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, starts at redraft, and more. And every sign up helps support my independent fantasy football content, namely this YouTube channel. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.